Do you miss your grandmother?
I do actually, yeah, I do miss my grandmother. And my grandfather, particularly being in Windsor. For me, Windsor is hers. Sometimes I'd come round and have a bit of tea with her because she had the best teas ever, so I used to get well fed.
On February 3rd, 2026, Buckingham Palace released a quiet, two-paragraph statement that detonated like a depth charge inside royal households and legal chambers across Britain. Prince William had been named sole beneficiary of one of the most secretive, historically significant private estates in the monarchy's entire history. Not Sandringham, not Balmoral, not Windsor. Something older, something hidden, something Queen Elizabeth II had been protecting for years. When Camilla and her son Tom discovered what had been transferred and what had been deliberately kept from them, the fury inside palace walls was unlike anything staff had witnessed in a generation. This is the story of every estate, every clause, every confrontation. From the Queen's handwritten covenants to Tom Parker Bowles's collapsed commercial schemes, to the moment Camilla stood silently watching William sign away her ambitions forever. This isn't just an inheritance story. It's Queen Elizabeth II's final, unanswerable chess move. The Cedar Estate, a secret older than most memories. Let's begin where this story truly begins. Not in 2026, but in 1944, during the darkest chapter of the Second World War. King George VI, faced with the existential uncertainty of wartime Britain, quietly purchased an estate tucked deep within the Chiltern Hills, straddling the border between Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire. It was called the Cedar Estate, and from the moment of its acquisition, it was designed to disappear. No royal registry listing, no public media report, no ceremonial acknowledgement. For over 8 decades, the Cedar Estate existed only in the whispered conversations of senior courtiers, a shadow property, known to almost nobody, protected by everyone who did know. And here is the first question you should be sitting with. Why would the royal family maintain a secret estate for 80 years? What was inside it that demanded that level of concealment? The answer arrived in the internal briefing notes shared with members of the Royal Correspondent Guild on the morning of February 3, 2026. What those notes described left even the most seasoned royal historians momentarily speechless. The Cedar Estate contains a private chapel with an engraved memorial vault listing royal family members who served in armed conflict. Archival vaults housing 186 oak chests filled with personal wartime correspondence and confidential royal communications. 72 previously undisclosed royal portraits, including never-before-seen oil paintings of King George VI and Princess Margaret. And perhaps most extraordinary of all, 14 sealed audio recordings of Queen Elizabeth II in private dialogue with Winston Churchill, Nelson Mandela, Ronald Reagan, and Charles de Gaulle. One archivist, who had spent decades working within the royal archives, described the collection in a single, unforgettable phrase. This was not, he said, a museum of history. It was the raw, unfiltered architecture of royal memory, a window into the private soul of the monarchy itself. Now here is what makes this even more significant. Between 2017 and 2021, Prince William had been quietly visiting the Cedar Estate on private weekends. Not as a tourist, not as a ceremonial guest. He walked the cedar groves with the Queen. He reviewed wartime correspondence. He personally catalogued naval dispatches. He refiled hundreds of letters from Second World War soldiers. He even repaired moisture control systems in the archival chambers. This was not duty by appearance. This was stewardship by conviction. And Queen Elizabeth noticed. In a handwritten annotation found within the Covenant Trust, she wrote these words: "He will inherit more than the crown. He will inherit the silence that preserved it." Those words were not accidental. They were a declaration. The Covenant Trust, a legal fortress built in secret. Now, we need to talk about the legal architecture that made this transfer possible, because it is as extraordinary as the estate itself. The Cedar estate does not fall under the Crown estate. It does not fall under the Duchy of Cornwall. Instead, it exists under a private legal mechanism called a covenant trust, created in 2020, filed under Charter Seal 0142, and witnessed by the Queen's personal solicitor, a constitutional advisor, and a notary from the Royal Archives. The trust came equipped with a delayed activation clause, designed to trigger only after two specific conditions were met: the conclusion of the Queen's state funeral and the moment Prince William was publicly recognized as heir to institutional responsibility. Both conditions have now been met. The official statement confirmed it plainly. Under the terms of the sealed covenant trust executed by Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II in 2020, the property known as the Cedar Estate shall pass in full and exclusive guardianship to His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales, effective immediately. Simple words. Irreversible consequences. But here is where the story shifts from inheritance to confrontation, because not everyone received this news with grace. Camilla and Tom, the plans that were never meant to be found. Multiple sources have confirmed what palace insiders had suspected for some time. Queen Camilla and her son Tom Parker Bowles had been quietly, persistently, and strategically angling to bring the Cedar estate under their influence for years. Beginning in late 2024, Camilla had been advocating internally for what she called a Windsor Cultural Legacy Center, a vision that included gourmet retreats celebrating British culinary heritage, literary salons emphasizing female royal narratives, and small group historical tours through the cedar groves. It sounded respectable on the surface, but beneath that surface, the ambitions were considerably less sentimental. Tom Parker Bowles saw something else entirely when he looked at the Cedar estate. He saw money. Private memos reviewed by royal insiders show he had been developing a vision that included a Michelin-grade tasting restaurant inside the old hunting lodge, an artisanal food brand called Royal Wild, featuring cedar-aged cheeses, wild trout, estate honey, and seasonal Highland wines, elite side affairs for exclusive guests, a commercial operation dressed in the clothing of royal heritage. And then came October 18th, 2025, and a leaked briefing note that changed everything. Tom's legal team had been exploring whether portions of the estate could be reclassified under public heritage law, arguing that its wartime origins justified cultural protection status. The legal reclassification would have weakened William's exclusive claim and potentially opened the door to shared management. Ask yourself this: does any of that sound like respect for a sacred royal legacy? Or does it sound like a commercial takeover wearing a heritage mask? In November 2025, Camilla hosted a private reception near Henley-on-Thames, inviting heritage donors, food critics, and art historians. On the surface, the event celebrated rural sustainability, but attendees tell a different story. It was, in the words of one guest, a trial balloon, a dry run for a public-private stewardship model that would allow Camilla's foundation and outside donors to share control of the Cedar estate. William learned of the event. He politely but firmly declined to participate. He maintained the Queen's original vision without equivocation. 3 weeks later, he activated the Covenant Trust. Northacre Hall, the estate, Camilla believed she had already won. The Cedar estate was not the only battleground. On January 31st, 2026, the Land Registry quietly updated to reflect another transfer that Camilla had not anticipated. Northacre Hall, a sprawling 1,200-acre heritage property nestled among Wiltshire's ancient hedgerows and Berkshire's rolling hills. Historically a lesser-known royal retreat, it had hosted hunting weekends and sensitive diplomatic gatherings during Queen Elizabeth II's reign. Its combination of historical prestige, agricultural revenue, and untapped licensing rights linked to an 800-year legacy made it, according to commercial assessments, a uniquely strategic royal asset. What makes the Northacre Hall transfer remarkable is the timing. Documents dated September 8, 2022, weeks before the Queen's passing, reveal that she had formally reclassified Northacre Hall from a shared Crown estate asset to a personal sovereign holding. This ensured she could transfer it privately through her will rather than through institutional succession. In Appendix R3, she wrote, "Let Northacre remain with the child who bears the burden of our future. Let it be not merely shelter, but sanctuary." The decision bypassed both Prince Charles, now King, and Princess Anne. The ripples through the inner royal circle were immediate and quiet, like a stone dropped into still water at midnight. According to palace archivists, this was the first personal transfer of its kind since Queen Victoria's Highland reallocation in 1872, executed in absolute secrecy. Only 2 living witnesses were privy to the codicil, Lady Sarah Chatsworth and the late Queen's legal advisor, Sir Alistair Denholm. The sealed envelope was deposited with 3 words on the outside, "For the reign after me." But Camilla had not been idle. Leaked notes from a palace aide confirm that by 2023 she and Tom had been lobbying discreetly to incorporate Northacre Hall into a royal culinary heritage venture. Presented publicly as a farm-to-table revival, but backed privately by luxury investors from the UAE and a Paris-based venture capital firm. The plan included a 5-star boutique hotel, a heritage cooking school, and a complete rebranding of the estate as a luxury Windsor destination. A commercial feasibility study from July 2025 valued Northacre Hall's licensing rights alone at over £48 million over a 10-year horizon. One courtier, speaking anonymously, summarized the moment with devastating precision. Camilla believed she had soft-bought the estate through influence. The Queen outmaneuvered her from beyond the grave. What followed was a carefully orchestrated campaign of whispers and subtle pressure, led by Camilla's longtime fixer, Maurice Lullo, a retired PR consultant known for palace back-channel games. Anonymous think pieces began appearing in late 2025, suggesting the monarchy had overinvested in heritage assets and needed to recalibrate generational equity. In a final push, Tom allegedly attempted to secure a lease inquiry on the Northacre Southern Orchard Tract, claiming it was unused arable land. The request was promptly denied by the Duchy of Cornwall legal team, citing inheritance protection. Palace sources described Camilla's reaction as a temper crisis in November 2025. The word used by those present was not anger. It was something colder, fury at being outflanked by a dead woman. Clarence Hill Estate, the Queen's most personal covenant. Now we arrive at what may be the most emotionally resonant chapter in this extraordinary story. In mid-January 2026, Princess Anne conducted a forensic review of the Queen's private correspondence at Windsor's Oak Room. What she discovered, folded 3 times, secured within a leather folio, bearing the mark W. William George, was a codicil unlike anything the family had seen. Clarence Hill Estate, nestled deep in the Chiltern Hills, accessible only via a discreet private driveway stretching 4 miles from any main road. A property that had been quietly purchased in 1947 by King George VI, designed as an off-book reserve for direct heirs, insulated from Parliament, public scrutiny, and the flux of royal funding. The Queen's directive was written in her own hand, clear, unambiguous, and deliberately personal. "I entrust Clarence Hill to my grandson William in full title and spirit, free of encumbrance, free of shadow. Let it remain outside the Crown estate, immune to politics, immune to scandal. This land is a covenant, not a commodity. Its purpose is to guard the moral line of succession." That phrase, immune to scandal, was not idle writing. Sources indicate the Queen had grown deeply wary of public controversies surrounding Prince Andrew and the volatile media ventures of Prince Harry. To Elizabeth, her legacy needed moral insulation, a place untouched by gossip, profit, or chaos. Clarence Hill would be William and Catherine's sanctuary, the ethical and dynastic compass of the family's future. Camilla learned of the transfer on January 20th. According to sources, she immediately summoned her legal team at Highgrove, alongside Tom. Her son had just suffered a significant publishing contract loss connected to a scandal involving his food brand's misuse of the royal crest. Clarence Hill was not sacred to her. It was a commercial opportunity, and she intended to claim it. Internal emails later leaked revealed her vision in her own words. "Imagine the launch, from the Queen's Garden to yours." By January 23rd, a proposal was already drafted under a newly registered company called Hill and Crown Limited, with Tom listed as executive director. The plan? To rebrand Clarence Hill into a boutique hospitality and agricultural brand, emphasizing regenerative luxury, climate resilience, and royal sustainability. Tom would become, in Camilla's vision, the Prince of Green Britain, his aristocratic future grounded in soil rather than in scandal. But the codicil had already been notarized in the royal archives. The legal transfer to the Duchy of Cornwall Trust had already been completed. Hill and Crown Limited arrived 3 weeks too late. Then came January 28th, and the leak that ended it all. An anonymous whistleblower, believed by some to be a disillusioned former aide, forwarded the internal Hill and Crown business deck to the Lord Chancellor's office, citing attempted commercial trespass on a sealed royal legacy. The leaked documents revealed everything: rebranding strategies, speculative luxury valuations, and mock-ups of Clarence Hill with corporate logos airbrushed over its Edwardian facade. The backlash was immediate and total. William confronted Camilla at Windsor during a private lunch intended to honor Catherine's recovery. Sources close to the royal household described the exchange as brief but devastating. William reportedly said, "Clarence Hill does not exist to be bottled, branded, or sold. It is the last sanctuary of my grandmother's soul, and I will protect it as I protect my wife and children." Camilla left without finishing her meal. Within 48 hours, Hill and Crown Limited was dissolved. Tom withdrew from 3 public appearances, citing stress-related fatigue. No formal statements were issued. But inside the palace, the message was unambiguous. King Charles, refusing direct engagement with the confrontation, later confided in Princess Anne with a line that has since passed into royal household legend. Elizabeth always knew who would hold the crown, not just wear it. Greystone Downs, where Camilla's ambitions reached their most dangerous point. Just when the dust from Clarence Hill seemed to be settling, a new battleground emerged. And this one was more audacious than anything that had come before. Greystone Downs, a protected estate of over 400 acres of ancient woodland, boasting a Tudor hunting lodge dating to 1578 and a private stone chapel adorned with 17th-century relics. Queen Elizabeth had spent over 4 decades preserving Greystone Downs as both a retreat and a living archive of royal moral code. Leaving it to William was not just practical. It was symbolic. He wasn't only heir to the throne, he was heir to restraint, stewardship, and quiet dignity. Camilla and Tom saw it differently. Valued at £80 million according to documents recovered from a former financial aide, Greystone Downs was their most coveted target yet. Their vision was staggering in its ambition, and many would argue, staggering in its audacity. £5,000 per night eco-lodges, curated farm-to-table dining hosted by Tom himself, a members-only royal culinary circle targeting elite clientele from the UAE and East Asia. All of it packaged as a Windsor sanctuary, a premium brand built on a foundation of someone else's heritage. Behind the scenes, Camilla's legal liaison, Sir Piers Mallory, had begun probing the will for any clause that might allow shared custodianship or heritage collaboration, any thread that could unravel William's exclusive control. Tom had quietly registered a new holding company in Luxembourg, Stag Crown Hospitality Limited, 3 weeks before the Queen's will was made public. Plans recovered by palace aides included converting the estate's chapel into a mindfulness retreat center and transforming stables once home to Elizabeth's prized ponies into a wellness vineyard spa. Then, Princess Anne intercepted a confidential email between Camilla's lawyer and a peer in the House of Lords. She shared what she found with William. Her assessment was delivered in the cool, measured tone those who know her understand to be far more frightening than outrage. "She's not challenging the crown," Anne said. "She's challenging Mother's ethics." William convened a closed-door strategy session with the Privy Purse. What followed was a swift and total legal counteroffensive. The sealed codicil released to the Royal Archives on February 3, 2026, made Camilla's plans impossible. Written in the Queen's hand and notarized in 2021, it explicitly barred any material transformation, commercial conversion, or brand exploitation of Greystone Downs without the express approval of William himself. The clause was a direct rebuke, proof that Elizabeth had not only anticipated the challenge, but had prepared for it years in advance. A palace footman who served during the confrontation described the moment Camilla opened the envelope bearing the Queen's monogram. She read it twice in complete silence. Then she spoke 4 words that no one in that room will ever forget. "Even in death, she leaves me caged." William's response came not in words but in action. On February 5th, he made an unscheduled visit to Greystone Downs, accompanied by Princess Catherine and their 3 children. Cameras captured the Wales family walking along the frozen edge of the estate's lake at sunset. No statement, no press conference, no drama. Just a family, on their land, honoring a promise. Green Heath Estate, the £37 million. Surprise. If Greystone Downs represented Camilla's most audacious move, then Green Heath Estate delivered her most humiliating defeat. Located southeast of Forest Lodge, Green Heath was a vast swath of undeveloped woodland spanning over 500 acres, bordering a historic Roman road and protected under a royal conservation deed. Insiders had long viewed it as a potential site for high-level retreats, secure diplomatic gatherings, and world-class rehabilitation programs under royal patronage. Camilla had coveted it, and her planning had commenced almost immediately after Queen Elizabeth's passing. She had misread the sealed section of Elizabeth's will, assuming Green Heath referred to a ceremonial plot or unused hunting grounds. She was comprehensively wrong. Green Heath was accompanied by a £37 million private trust, quietly seeded through decades of strategic transfers personally approved by the Queen, a financial buffer that had been growing in the background for years, invisible to those who hadn't been told to look for it. The discovery of this fund enraged Tom Parker Bowles. He had long envisioned a media-branded culinary wellness center on the land, backed by Dubai investors and a French spa conglomerate. Camilla had allegedly promised Tom she would use her regency privilege to secure royal endorsement while King Charles remained semi-retired. Promotional dinners had already been planned. Elite society invitations were being drafted. Organic wines, locally sourced produce, and Duchy olive oils were selected for showcase events with foreign dignitaries. The machine was running. And then, on January 30th, 2026, Princess Anne, acting on behalf of the Crown Trust Authority, sealed the asset transfer, backdated to December 28, 2025. William officially received full rights to Green Heath. The £37 million trust went with it. That evening, a royal black sedan delivered to Clarence House the final documents, along with something Camilla had not expected: a private audio recording of Queen Elizabeth herself, explaining her wishes for Green Heath in her own voice. The estate was to become a secure legacy zone, reserved exclusively for environmental education programs, child rehabilitation initiatives, and educational stewardship under the direct patronage of William and Catherine. Camilla summoned Tom and 2 estate lawyers to a crisis meeting at Romley House that same night. According to palace leaks, the conversation turned almost immediately to legal maneuvering. Camilla was prepared to challenge Elizabeth's mental clarity at the time of the Green Heath deed, to claim that William and Catherine, aided by influential advisors, had manipulated an elderly queen. It was a posthumous attack on Elizabeth herself, an attempt to rewrite history from inside the family that history belonged to. King Charles, despite his frailty, issued a private warning within 48 hours. Any attempt to undermine Elizabeth's will would be treated as sedition against the Crown's memory. When the letter leaked to the Times on February 2nd, public outrage erupted. Pro-monarchy groups, constitutional scholars, and royal historians lined up to denounce the plot as morally and legally indefensible. Princess Catherine's quiet appearance at a Windsor children's hospice that same day served as the defining visual counterpoint, dignity and compassion standing in absolute silent contrast to Camilla's scheming. At 9:46 a.m. on February 3rd, William arrived at the Green Heath gates alone. A simple navy wool coat, a single aide, no cameras, no press, no fanfare. He signed the inaugural charter of the Green Heath Royal Future Trust, permanently closing the estate to commercial exploitation and codifying it under an ethical framework that mirrored Elizabeth's environmental and educational vision. As the signing concluded, a Rolls-Royce appeared at the western boundary of the estate. Camilla stepped out. Dark glasses, lips pressed tight, a black leather folder clutched to her chest. She did not speak. She did not approach. She merely stood there, observing, in complete silence, the unfolding of a vision she could not claim, control, or reverse. Tom never appeared. By evening, Camilla had canceled a royal culinary event scheduled for February 4th. Her PR team issued a single line. Her Majesty Queen Camilla regrets the recent developments and supports the King's reaffirmation of the late Queen's legacy. Oakidge Estate, the Queen's final word, and then came Oakidge, the last estate, the one that, in many ways, said everything. A sealed leather envelope bearing Elizabeth II's royal cipher was formally presented to Prime Minister Harriet Shawcross on the morning of February 3rd, confirming the transfer of Oakidge Estate to William. Unlike Balmoral or Sandringham, Oakidge was not bound by Crown Estate regulations. It was a private holding under a unique clause in the Queen's will. A fortress of pastoral retreat, an untouched expanse bordering Thames forests, used by George VI for hunting, and containing the ruins of a Tudor chapel hidden within its grounds. Its estimated value, £118 million. But that figure was, as everyone involved understood, entirely beside the point. Oakidge had been Queen Elizabeth's personal hearth during family disputes, a place of refuge, reflection, and resolve, the cradle of William's early summers, the place where, as a child, he first learned what it meant to belong to something larger than himself. One final journal entry, tucked beside pressed lavender in the estate's private library, spoke simply to future stewardship and the care of legacy. Even as the transfer was completed, Camilla and Tom remained quiet, though whispers circulated about a possible legal appeal via the Privy Purse Committee, claiming Oakidge had benefited from public funds and could be reclassified. William had anticipated this. He ordered a full review of restoration logs and security payments dating back to 1953. Forensic accountants began cross-checking every line, every expense, every receipt. But Elizabeth, as always, had thought further ahead than anyone who opposed her. The private will contained a clause titled Anticipatory Obstruction, nullifying any challenge to Oakidge by individuals outside the Windsor bloodline or married into the family after 2010. When the clause was read to senior royals in the green drawing room, silence fell completely. Camilla stormed out. Tom reportedly cursed his lawyers. Princess Anne, who had been sitting quietly throughout the reading, turned to King Charles and said with perfect composure, "I always knew this day would come." That evening, William, Catherine, and their 3 children toured Oakidge for the first time as its stewards. George, standing atop the old watchtower ruins and looking out across the frozen estate, asked his father a question that those present say will stay with them forever. "Will this be ours forever?" William's answer was calm, measured, and completely certain. "As long as we protect it." Shortly after, a letter arrived from the late Queen's personal solicitor, Sir Jonathan Arborfield. It contained one final passage from Elizabeth herself, words that rendered every legal maneuver, every commercial scheme, and every back-channel lobbying effort entirely irrelevant. "If ever this estate is challenged, let it be known, Oakidge belongs not to power, but to patience. Let the one who bore the weight of the crown's future, not the burden of entitlement, carry it forward." Signed, Elizabeth R. What this all means, and why it matters. Step back for a moment and consider what Queen Elizabeth II actually achieved across these transfers. She did not simply leave properties to her grandson. She built a legal fortress around him, layer by layer, estate by estate, clause by clause, designed to withstand every challenge that ambition, commerce, and family rivalry could throw at it. She anticipated the commercial proposals. She anticipated the legal maneuvering. She anticipated the public pressure campaigns. She built in responses to all of them, years before they happened, from a woman in her 90s who never stopped thinking several moves ahead. And ask yourself the question that sits at the heart of all of this. Why did the Queen feel this level of protection was necessary? The answer is not flattering for those who forced her hand. The answer is that within her own family, within the institution she had given her entire life to, she identified actors whose priorities were not legacy, not service, and not the welfare of the monarchy's future. They were commercial. They were personal. They were about brand building and financial positioning and the transformation of 7 centuries of royal heritage into a hospitality portfolio. Elizabeth chose William precisely because she saw in him what those others lacked. Not ambition, not the desire for profit or public platform, but the willingness to quietly catalog wartime letters in an archival chamber, to repair moisture controls in a vault that no camera would ever film, to walk the cedar groves with an elderly queen and listen more than he spoke. Stewardship. That was the word she inscribed into every covenant, and it was not, she understood, a common quality. William's response to every attempt to circumvent the Queen's wishes has been consistent, composed, and entirely in keeping with the woman who chose him. He did not escalate publicly. He did not give press conferences or issue statements of outrage. He signed charters. He walked with his children. He let the legal architecture his grandmother built speak on his behalf, and it spoke very loudly indeed. As morning broke over Windsor Great Park on February 3, 2026, and pale sunlight spilled across frost-kissed hedgerows, a new chapter of royal history had already been written, not in ceremony or proclamation, but in the quiet, irrevocable language of sealed trusts, notarized codicils, and a grandmother's handwritten certainty. Prince William walked the pathways of an estate that was now, fully and finally, his own. George bounced alongside him, full of questions about chapels and hidden groves and the meaning of history. Charlotte clutched a leather-bound journal, absorbing every detail. And William answered each question with the patience of a man who understood, perhaps better than anyone alive, what it means to be entrusted with something precious. Camilla's ambitions were not merely defeated, they were rendered structurally impossible, not by confrontation, not by palace politics, but by the preemptive legal genius of a sovereign who had spent decades watching, assessing, and preparing. Every commercial scheme Tom Parker Bowles drafted. Every back-channel lobbying campaign Camilla's advisors ran. Every legal probe into shared custodianship. Every rebranding proposal, every holding company registered, every mock-up with corporate logos airbrushed over Edwardian facades. All of it anticipated, all of it neutralized, all of it answered in clauses written years before the challenges were ever made. As a senior footman who served both Queen Elizabeth and now William put it with quiet finality, this wasn't just a house, it was the Queen's final chess move. And in the grand tradition of the woman who made it, the move was perfect. For William, these estates are not trophies, they are responsibilities, and he has never once suggested otherwise. For Camilla and Tom, the battle is over. The estates are sealed. The covenants are unassailable. The Queen's voice, preserved in letters and legal clauses and a private audio recording, has spoken with a clarity that no living advocate could match. Legacy, Queen Elizabeth understood, is not measured in wealth or influence or the size of a commercial portfolio. It is measured in stewardship, integrity, and the courage to protect what matters, even from those who stand closest to it. William got the estate. He got the mission that came with it. And he got something far more enduring than either: the absolute documented certainty that the woman who knew him best trusted him most. If you've been watching this story unfold, share this video, drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe. Because this chapter may be closed, but the story of what William does with the trust he's been given is only just beginning.